Hi, we're back. 8 class pets plus 1 squirrel divided by 1 dog equals, remember the word? Chaos. And we are at the Nancy art room turtle chapter. Call me Nancy, she says. And all of the characters are having their own take on the situation. They all have their own perspective about what's happening, right? And can you put yourself in the scene and picture what it would be like for you? What would your perspective be if you were at this school that's empty aside from all of the pets and all of this was going on? What would you be thinking? How would you tell the story? Actually, that would be a cool journal prompt, wouldn't it? Like a cool thing to write about, if to put yourself there and have a chapter be from your perspective. That would be really cool. Okay, here we go. Sometimes people who come to visit Mrs. Hinkle's room get confused. They ask, is he a turtle or a tortoise? Mrs. Hinkle says, and Nancy is a she and not a he, and she is a turtle. Mrs. Hinkle and we think there's a big difference between turtles and tortoises. We can't see how people get confused. By the end of the year of art class, Mrs. Hinkle's students will never again be the kind of people who get confused about this. Do you know the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? I think they're going to tell us. Tortoises live on dry land, but we turtles spend most of our time in the water. But sometimes we like to have a dry land to crawl up on. My beautiful glass case has both, along with a nice heat lamp to keep me warm. Nice and warm and cozy. Oh, I'm sorry, I fell asleep there under the lamp. Where was I? Oh, yes, I'm a mud turtle, so I'll never grow bigger than 6 inches. 6 inches, let's see. 6 inches, well, if you think of a ruler, like a ruler you might have at your house or a ruler that you might have seen at school, a ruler is 12 inches, a foot. And so 6 inches is exactly half of a ruler. So you can kind of picture that's the biggest Nancy will get. Mud turtles only will get as big as 6 inches. Let's see, this makes me the right size for Mrs. Hinkle to sometimes take me out of my glass case and set me on the table so the boys and girls can see me better. Don't poke at Nancy or try to pick her up, Mrs. Hinkle says. She's very shy. It's nice to have someone else around to explain that you're not unfriendly, but only shy. I can relate to that. Yeah. I have times when I'm quiet, just shy, not being unfriendly. I'm just kind of shy. Mrs. Hinkle, excuse me, teaches art. Even though I'm shy, I like that the children ask if I can come out of my case so they can use me as a model. Mrs. Hinkle gives me a piece of melon or lettuce to munch on so that I will stay still and not explore the table too much while my picture is being drawn. I like to have my picture drawn, but I also like to draw my own pictures. Sometimes Mrs. Hinkle pours food coloring onto a piece of foil and lets me walk through it. And then she sets down a piece of art paper and I walk onto that, leaving colored footprints with my little webbed feet. We don't put paint on a turtle's shell, Mrs. Hinkle says, but a little bit of food coloring won't hurt Nancy's feet. One afternoon, after waking up for a nap and finding that all the children and Mrs. Hinkle too had left, I was admiring all the new pictures Mrs. Hinkle had hung up that day. The children had been very excited and had talked about the artist who would be visiting the next day. We keep getting more details about this art situation, don't we? An artist who was going from school to judge pictures and give out prizes for the best pictures. I think the best pictures are the ones with me in them. But all of a sudden there was a commotion in the hall, so I pulled myself into my shell in case there was danger. A commotion is like kind of a racket, like something happening, usually kind of loud, not a calm noise. Good thing, because the noise came into the classroom. A dog was barking, a parrot was squawking, and a squirrel was shouting, "Help, help! The nasty, smelly dog wants to eat me!" And a hamster, a rabbit, and a rat were yelling, "Run, Twitch, run!" The wheels of the cart the dog were pulling went squeak, squeal, and the fish in the tank on the cart were yelling in their tiny fish voices, "School, school!" Even with my head tucked safely inside my shell, I could see well enough to tell that Twitch must be the squirrel, since the others were telling Twitch to run, and it was the squirrel who ran up onto one of the tables where Mrs. Hinkle keeps her art supplies. The dog jumped up there too. So much energy, it nearly wore me out just to watch them. Yikes. Twitch leaped off the table and over the bookshelves, pulling himself up by Art and Western Civilization, a book, And the dog couldn't follow because the rope that tied him to the leg of the cart wasn't long enough, and the dog ran back and forth on the table, knocking over the paints and brushes and a box of chalk, and the paint was leaking and dripped off the edge of the table, making a puddle on the floor. I liked the slow, thick way that paint dripped, dripped, drip. Where was I? Oh, yes, I recognized Twitch, since sometimes I'd seen him look into the window of the classroom. Still, because I'm shy, I had never talked to him before. But now that he was in danger, I wanted to help. It's scary when someone wants to eat you. I called over, "Excuse me, Mr. Squirrel, sir." This was very abrupt of me. Turtle manners call for long and slow and proper introductions, but this was an emergency. I said, "Don't you have a hard shell you can escape into?" "Nope," Twitch said, springing from one bookcase to another. "Just fur." Fur is not nearly as useful as a hard shell. I asked, "Do you have a stink gland?" "Don't I wish?" Twitch bounded from from the bookcase to Mrs. Hinkle's desk to her chair to the floor. My goodness, could he move fast? The dog could move fast too, but when he jumped off the art table, his fish tank cart swung around and knocked into my table. My case tipped. I pulled all the way into my shell again. My case teetered. I closed my eyes. My case tottered over the edge and onto the floor. My case went landing on its side, and I rolled right out of it. By the time I decided I was still alive, Twitch had already escaped into the hall. The dog, still attached to the cart, ran out of the room, and the parrot was flapping her wings at him, and the hamster, the rabbit, and the rat were scurrying pretty fast too. The dog had left a trail of painted footprints from the table to the door. It was mean of him to want to eat Twitch, but I do have to say he was a very talented artist. I decided to follow. Next chapter is Angel, the 5th grade corn snake. Okay, I have to get rid of my S's ready for this chapter. Sassafras. Isn't that an absolutely delicious sounding word? I simply love saying sassafras. Here, you say it. Society also has succulent syllables, as does suspicious. The society I'm in is Mrs. Shaughnessy's 5th grade classroom. Suspicious is how outsiders sometimes react to me because I'm a snake. They say I'm sneaky and slithery and have slimy skin. Sneaky and slithery, yes, but stroke my skin and see I'm not the slightest bit slimy. You can start tapping your finger every time you hear an S word. You'll be like, don't you think? Just in that last sentence. Listen to that last sentence again for all the S sounds. But stroke my skin and see I'm not the slightest bit slimy. I have no fangs, no venom. I'm a simple orange and black and red corn snake as long as a 5th grader is tall. Mrs. Shaughnessy's syllabus is history. Sassafras. History is such an interesting subject besides being an amusing thing for a snake to say. History. After classes, I'm somewhat solitary. A squirrel sometimes peeks in the window, but he slinks down again as soon as he spies me. Doesn't he know he's too substantial a mouthful for a snake my size to swallow? Only a week I sup, mostly on frozen mice supplied by Mrs. Shaughnessy. 6 out of 7 days, I could be a safe associate to all the other class pets, including the albino rat, who sometimes scurries past my doorway fast, as though suspecting I would feast on him. So Angel only eats 1 day a week. Mrs. Shaughnessy brings him frozen mice, and on 6 of the 7 days, Angel doesn't want to eat anything else. So it must be nice to have sensitive fingers to unfasten one's cell as one wishes and explore the school's silent halls. So I was pleased one after school afternoon when a ruckus, that's like a synonym for a commotion. Remember we were just talking about commotion, kind of loud noise, like a little bit crazy sounding. Commotion and a ruckus, they're almost synonyms. Synonym means a different word that means the same thing. So commotion or a ruckus. A ruckus spilled down the hall and into Mrs. Shaughnessy's classroom. My tongue tasted a shift in the atmosphere. The squirrel and the rat burst onto the scene, along with a hamster, another excellent word, and a rabbit. From the hall came the sounds of a dog snarling. "Leave me alone, this has nothing to do with you," while a parrot squawked, "Olé, olé, keep away!" In the classroom, the hamster saw me and squeaked, "Yikes! This is the 5th grade where the snake lives. Snake equals danger." The squirrel tried to skedaddle and shoved the rabbit who stood betwixt him and the door, but the rabbit snapped, "The snake's locked up, but the dog isn't. You're safer in here." So the squirrel hastened for higher ground instead. Up the window blinds he scurried, and although they swayed beneath his weight and smacked against the glass, from there it was a short distance to a long, narrow tube above the blackboard where the historic maps are scrolled. The squirrel paced back and forth above medieval Europe and Renaissance cities. Look who's coming. From the hallway, we caught occasional glimpses of the dog as he sprinted from classroom to classroom, trying to escape the parrot's beak. For some reason I could not discern, the dog was towing a fish tank on a pushcart, and from a slight distance, a sociable but slow-moving voice called down the hall, "Hey guys, don't move so fast." Who's that? The turtle, right? In Mrs. Shaughnessy's classroom, the nervous hamster ran around in circles and said, "That turtle carries her shell around with her for protection. Protection against dogs, protection against snakes. Could we make some sort of shell for Twitch?" The rabbit was looking at the shelves where Mrs. Shaughnessy keeps my supplies, including the large lidless snake transport box. The rabbit suggested, "Or a shell to cover the dog?" I deciphered the rabbit's scheme. I myself do not like dogs who snip and snarl and sometimes eat a poor harmless snake who has no poison to protect himself. So I said, "I could help." The squirrel had misstepped and was dangling from the cord that lowers the maps. "How?" he asked. "By eating me before the dog has a chance to?" "I've had my frozen mouse this week," I said. "My stomach is satisfied until Tuesday." They all said, "Ugh." "Set me free," I said. "I'll distract the dog while some of you push that snake transport box off the shelf. Timed just right, it should tip over on top of him and hold him safe from eating any of us. I would never be so discourteous to snack on schoolmates, except perhaps on Tuesdays. Besides, history teaches us that we are stronger with allies." "Allies," the rat repeated, "like fish in a school." "Trust," I encouraged them. The fearless, steadfast rat, scurried to my enclosure and shoved that screen aside. And just then the dog ran in, still attached to his cart and snarling, "Where's that less than worthless squirrel?" The squirrel tried to scamper back up the cord, unscrolling Renaissance cities until Florence was on the floor. The blue and gold macaw flew into the classroom and squawked, "Senior dog's on the loose, so move your caboose. Everyone to your places, pretend you're at the races." No one told the bird her meter was off. I slithered to the floor. Seeing me, the dog scuttled in reverse. If he could have scaled up his fish cart, I suspect he would have. He didn't notice the squirrel, the rat, and the hamster climb up onto the shelf and begin shoving at that snake transport carton. The macaw saw and went to their support. Check out this crazy illustration. A commotion, a ruckus, chaos, right? Wow. And I think it's cool to see how the artist showed motion in the picture. Can you see all those swirls and lines? You can almost feel the motion happening. Let's see, the box moved closer and closer to the edge of the shelf. I hissed, posing as ferocious, causing the dog to back up closer and closer to the overhang of the shelf. The rabbit thumped her back leg, and the vibration was the last assistance that suspended receptacle needed, and over the edge the snake transport tipped, showering pine shavings on all, but the fit and our timing were flawless. The box landed just so to trap the dog, but not the cart inside. Sassafras, I said. Okay, Galileo and Newton, the science lab geckos, are next.